Monday, December 25th. In reprisal for the Finnish offensive, Soviet planes carry out intense bombing of Helsinki and other cities in the country, and attack roads and railway lines. In the far north of the Mannerheim Line, the Soviet artillery heavily shells entrenched Finnish positions, which endure the onslaught. In his visit to units stationed on the Western Front, Hitler reveals his concerns about Stalin's aggression in Finland. He is not only worried that an Allied intervention could result in his enemies controlling the iron deposits in the north of Sweden that are important for the German economy, but also suspicious of the territorial ambitions of the Soviet leader. In the Sea War, Karl Donitz, the head of the U-boat Waffe, tells the High Navy Command that the morale of his submarine crews could not be better due to their many successes in laying mines and attacking enemy merchant and war ships. However, he expresses his concerns about the repeated failures of torpedoes. The British merchant ship Loch Doon sinks after hitting a mine laid by Karl Heinrich Jenisch's U-22. The vessel Stanholm has the same fate, hitting a mine placed by U-33 under the command of Hans Wilhelm von Dresky. Tuesday, December 26th. Finnish patrols carry out a number of attacks, sabotaging Soviet army kitchens, blowing up bridges to hold up the enemy's march, and attacking their only communications, so they are forced to use post as the only means of communication. In the Sea War, the harsh winter makes life even more difficult for ships' crews in the belligerent countries. A large number of the Baltic ports are frozen over, and many U-boats trapped by the ice. Hitler meets with the High Command of the Kriegsmarine to plan the joint operation that will be the responsibility of a special general staff created by the OKW, Armed Forces High Command. Raeder insists that the invasion of the Nordic countries would protect the transport of minerals and provide the opportunity to establish naval bases in the area. Combined land, sea, and air forces could be used to take the ports and airfields in an action that would take the British by surprise and weaken their ability to respond. In Britain, the Royal Navy begins to lay anti-submarine mines at strategic points along the coast, while the RAF incorporates the first pilots arriving from Australia. Wednesday, December 27th. The Soviet troops, surrounded in Suomussalmi, are defended by the Finnish army. This victory gives the Finns a great boost in morale all along the front. In Berlin, the Nazi Party publishes figures claiming it has 4,985,400 members. 70% of the leaders and political post holders joined after Hitler's coming to power. In the Soviet Union, the Communist Party has 9 million members. Following tests considered totally successful in the prison of Brandenburg, where 8 disabled people were locked in a room converted into a gas chamber, those in charge of the T4 project order the construction of 3 more gas chambers in Grafeneck, Hartheim, and Sonnenstein. The Union of Armed Struggle, one of the Polish resistance movements in the interior of the country, assassinates 2 German officers in a suburb of Warsaw. 120 Polish civilians, chosen randomly, will be executed in reprisal. Thursday, December 28th. Hitler receives a letter with a Swiss postmark from the industrialist Fritz Thyssen, who supported him for a number of years, criticizing his agreements with the Russians. In the early hours of the morning, Finnish troops fight against the last Soviet units still resisting in the city of Suomussalmi, while the 44th Division of the Red Army, under General Anton Vinogradov, ensures constant attacks in its attempts to reach the city. Upon receiving news of the desperate situation of the 163rd Division, Vinogradov decides to cancel all offensive operations and deploy his troops in defensive positions along 35 kilometers of the Rot Road. But the Finns, with their extraordinary mobility in the snow, continue to eliminate groups of Soviet soldiers. The Soviet High Command begins to think about a large-scale withdrawal in this first offensive in the Winter War. In the Sea War, U-30, commanded by Fritz Julius Lemp, launches its torpedoes against the British battleship Barham to the north of the Hebrides. Hit on the port side, the ship begins to take on water and has to be steered to Liverpool. Friday, December 29th. Groups of Finnish special forces blow up stretches of the Leningrad-Murmansk railway line, while the bulk of the army carries out a counteroffensive that forces the Soviets to retreat from the north of Lake Ladoga and the area of Lake Chianta. After sending the letter to Hitler criticizing the Nazi leader's agreements with the Soviets, industrialist Fritz Thyssen becomes a wanted man, and the Reich security forces are ordered to detain him. The German businessman, in exile first in Switzerland and then Portugal, whose steelworks and foundries are confiscated, insists on sending a message to the German people about the situation of the Jews and the Nazi government's pact with the communists, whom Hitler described in his book Mein Kampf as a bunch of criminals with their hands stained with blood. In the United States, testing begins on the first version of the super bomber B-24, known as the B-24 Liberator. A highly mobile 4-engine plane. More models of this plane will be built during the war than any other in America. Saturday, December 30th. The last Soviet resistance in Suomussalmi is quashed, and all armaments confiscated. With the 163rd Division out of the way, the Finns prepare for the final battle with the 44th Division of the Red Army, which is strung out along the Rat Road. Stalin's forces try to terrorize the Finns by bombing the large cities. In his New Year message to the German people, Hitler declares that Judeo-capitalist society will not outlast the 20th century and announces there will only be peace when we have won the war. Meanwhile, despite the economic difficulties, the rearmament of the German military goes on. The Luftwaffe has new squadrons of planes, and the Kriegsmarine continues to increase the number of U-boats that patrol the seas. At the same time, the OKH, Army High Command, analyzes and modifies its plans for the offensive in Western Europe. In France, the Allied commanders decide to deploy their most experienced troops on the Belgian frontier, while the reserve divisions made up of older men occupy the River Meuse area facing the Ardennes. Sunday, December 31st. In the Sea War, U-32, commanded by Paul Buchel, sinks the Norwegian merchantman Lune. To date, the submarines of the U-boat Waffe have sunk 114 Allied ships and lost only 9 units. Britain and France inform the League of Nations of their willingness to send help to Finland in its struggle against the Soviet invasion. In Berlin, Hitler meets with the Armed Forces High Command and a number of ministers to analyze Soviet military weakness in Finland and consider the possibility of Allied countries intervening in the region. The Nazi leader is convinced that if Britain and France declare war on the Soviet Union, Germany will have to provide material help, something that many Germans will find difficult to swallow, and he will be forced to modify his plans to invade the Western countries. The meeting ends with the decision to make diplomatic efforts to achieve a peace agreement between the Soviet Union and Finland as soon as possible. Such an armistice would be great success for Hitler.